Shark, so that is a good thing for him as well. And the San Jose Sharks will be happy to get their old captain back, and Jumbo Joe, who has been there for a very long time, is back now with the Sharks team. And in other news, Andrei Markov, also from the Canadiens, will not be coming back. He actually has spent the last 2 seasons with the KHL, but the 40-year-old defenseman will not be returning to the Canadiens. He's been a staple for that Canadiens defense for a long time. He was even the captain for them for a couple seasons as well, I remember. So he was hoping to come back, but the general manager says they will not have him return. So that's there too. And then we have 2 contract signings. Zach Rowinski first signs a 3-year contract with the Blue Jackets, so that's good because they get him back as well. And he's only he's 22 years old, so a very young defenseman for the Columbus Blue Jackets that they can keep relying on for the future and for the next couple seasons. And then we have Pavel Zacha, who is also signing a 3-year contract with the Devils, so that's also good for them. Pavel Zacha was their third-line center last year, but he's going to move to the fourth line with the addition of their 2 centers and Jack Hughes as well from the draft. So Pavel Zacha was also actually contemplating going to the KHL for a while, but thankfully he is coming back to the NHL and going to stick with the Devils for a while.
I think one contract not to pass up as well is Jake Gardner signing with the Hurricanes. I'm looking online now. Supposedly he turned down a 3-year, $15.75 million deal from the Canadiens as well to join the Canes. So there must have been a big draw to go to Carolina, with them being the playoff team they were last year and kind of getting on the up and coming in the league from kind of getting back to form where they were in mid to late 2000s.
Yeah, and it kind of serves as I wouldn't say a replacement, but they're kind of trying to find a suitable replacement for Justin Falk since he's left to the Anaheim Ducks as well. So having the Hurricanes obviously want to keep their defensive depth in there. So having a veteran guy like Jake Gardner there does definitely fill in their ranks, and he can actually help with the veteran presence in the locker room, so he can help the rookies bring into the defensive line, because it's a very young defensive core there.
Sure, that makes sense. All right, well, let's get started with the Atlantic Division.
Alrighty.
Like last week, we're going to start from the bottom, head to the top, and in 8th place in the Atlantic Division, start off with the Ottawa Senators, record of 29, 47, and 6. 64 points. That's a rough record just looking at that.
Yeah, it is rough. And unfortunately, I just don't know if this season's going to be any better for them, unfortunately. They just don't have enough pieces, really. They're a very young rebuilding team, I would say. So it's going to be hard for them to just even try to be in a competitive mode, especially with how competitive the Atlantic Division is this year. And it's going to be tough for them, but at the same time, they're also, you kind of expect that from a rebuilding team, a very young team. They're just kind of bringing it up a little bit. I mean, their youngest guys there, we could talk about them. Brady Tkachuk is obviously a big one there, so he's going to be able to fill the ranks there as well. Anthony Duclair got signed to them as well, so they're trying to get as much young guys as possible and try to develop it a little bit more as the season goes on. But it's going to be tough for them this season. I think the expectation should be to just find a way to be competitive and, get those early wins, get yourself hyped up, but, don't expect too much of yourself as a team as well. But also the biggest one, I think you would just have to see growth from your team. Yeah,
it seems like Ottawa's kind of been in this kind of rebuilding state, or kind of like this limbo between rebuilding and actually a competitor for the past couple seasons, kind of teetering back and forth. But now I think they're, with Erik Karlsson leaving, what was that, last season or 2 seasons ago?
I think it was 2 seasons ago.
2 seasons ago. They've kind of been in rebuilding since then. They really haven't returned to form where they were with Karlsson, so I think they'll still need a couple more seasons to rebuild, get all their ducks in a row, and find a way, like you said, to be competitive, because that's probably their main goal right now. Kind of see what's working to get the wins.
Yeah, see what works, and at the same time, it's odd that we're talking about them now, because 2 years ago, actually, I want to say 3 years ago. 3 years ago, they were just in the Eastern Conference Final.
That's
against
true,
the Pittsburgh
yeah.
Penguins.
That's right. I forgot about that.
3 seasons later, now they find themselves, bottom of the league.
Bottom of the league, yeah.
It's crazy how just a couple seasons really changed for a team.
Yeah.
So they actually did bring in a couple people though from around the league. They actually brought in Anisimov from the Chicago Blackhawks, so they get a little bit more forward depth there. Connor Brown, Nikita Zaitsev is a good defenseman as well. Ron Hainsey to bring in some veteran presence on defense too, and they got Tyler Ennis. So and along with them is also a new head coach. So. They're making a lot of changes. They're trying to see what works, but at the same time, they're really focused on their young and up-and-coming stars.
They have all the pieces of the puzzle.
Yeah.
But or so it may seem, or more pieces of the puzzle that they need. But it'll be interesting to see if they can execute, as always. With most of these teams that are in that rebuilding phase, it's always about, will they actually be able to, use what they have to make the wins happen, because at the end of the day, that's what you got to do. So
yeah, and at the same time, the young superstars you want to look out for this season is Brady Tkachuk too. So you want to look at them, and John Gabriel Pajot as well. Those two guys are going to be big for the Senators. So if anything, you just got to look at the growth of your superstars in that team as well.
Sure, that makes sense. All right, shall we move on? Next team, seventh in the standings, were the Detroit Red Wings. 32-40-10 was their record. 74 points, finishing seventh in the division.
Yeah, this Red Wings team they're still on the rebuilding phase, and they've been on that for about 2 years.
Yeah.
So this is still the rebuilding phase, but this year, I think this is their year that they step up a level. I don't think they're still not playoff bound, but I think they will step up a level in their competitive level because they get Steve Yzerman as their general manager now.
Yep.
And obviously the legend is coming back to them, and you already can look at what Steve Yzerman did for the Tampa Bay Lightning and how he brought them into fruition and the success he had there.
Sure.
So he can bring in that same experience to the Detroit Red Wings and the organization itself, which he knows very well. And it also is not a bad idea to have Nicholas Kronwall as your assistant there as well. So that's a great 1-2 punch there as well.
I think Detroit, they were such a fun team to watch, back in the late 2000s when they had their glory years, I guess you could say, with Datsyuk, Zetterberg, that kind of core of guys when they would seem like they were going up against Pittsburgh like constantly in the playoffs and stuff and having a great rivalry there. I'd kind of hope they return to that form because that was good hockey back then, but they've definitely lost a lot of pieces since, so it'll be interesting to see how they rebuild and kind of what the process is doing that. I feel like they definitely have a younger core, which is good, so they will have good players going into the future, but it should be interesting for them.
Yeah, and Dylan Larkin is obviously a great superstar to keep looking forward to, especially because of that. And, the Detroit Red Wings, ironically enough, I actually really hated them during those 2000s eras, during the time where they were facing Pittsburgh. I was actually rooting for Pittsburgh in the 2009 season, 2008s, when they were facing Detroit, because I just didn't like the fact that the Detroit Red Wings were winning everything and winning Stanley Cups after Stanley Cups.
Because they had their 20-some seasons in a row going to the playoffs, I think it was.
Yeah, and they won the Stanley Cup back in 1995. If I know that's one year they won a Stanley Cup, and it's just like ever since then they just kept going to the playoffs, and it's just that was the team to beat every time.
Ever since the playoff streak ended, though, they just really haven't been that same team, And
it felt like in 2009, that was when the Pittsburgh Penguins were the underdog, and that's when they were able to win, and now it's the Pittsburgh Penguins that are winning everything, ironically enough. So
the tables have turned a little bit.
Now, actually, one key acquisition I will say that the Red Wings did get back is Valtteri Filppula. He was there for a couple seasons, then went to the Lightning, then went to Philadelphia,
so he's kind of bounced around a little bit.
He's bounced around a lot, but he's a very good presence as a veteran guy. He's a great center. He's actually already plugged in for the Red Wings as their second line center. So we already know that he's gonna come in and chip in and do a lot of production for them already this season.
That makes sense.
That's a big acquisition for them. But again, playoffs are not really looking too high for the Red Wings. But I do think that they will still take their competition to a next level this year.
I feel like they'll start to move up a little bit, just like Ottawa. I still feel like they'll be on the outside looking into the end of the season, but I think they're definitely moving in the right direction. Mm-hmm. So that's always good to see. All right, in sixth place in the Atlantic Division were the Buffalo Sabres with a record of 33-39-10, coming in just 2 points ahead of the Red Wings at 76 points to finish, like I said, in sixth place.
Yeah, the Buffalo Sabres. It seems that for some reason For all this, for the amount of playoff drought that they've had, it just seems like they just never can find the answer to how they can succeed. And from what I've been listening to, the new head coach that comes in is Ralph Kruger, and Ralph Kruger is going to not necessarily change how the hockey's played, but he's going to change how the culture is being in Buffalo. And I feel like the Buffalo Sabres at this point, they needed a culture change because this amount of losing for so many years has got to be plaguing the city.
Yeah.
Has got to be plaguing the fans. And there was never really an answer. They even have the talent. There was Jack Eichel. There was Ryan O'Reilly. There was Jason Pominville. And now Jason Pominville just left. And it's just they had the talent, but it's just every single time something goes wrong.
Yep.
And then automatically, maybe during the second half of the season, everything just goes downhill.
It seems like before every season, we hear about how the Sabres are going to be like the team this year, you know, and how they have all the pieces together. And they'll start off hot, and then it'll just all come crumbling down later in the season, and they'll be on the outside looking. And as always, it's just kind of been the norm for them, you know, with Jack Eichel and you know, with the guys they've had in past years like Pominville and O'Reilly, and now
it's Jeff Skinner.
All of those pieces are gone, you know, and it was they're kind of like the joke a couple of years ago about like, well, if you go to Buffalo, you go to Buffalo for your career to die, basically, you know, because once you go to Buffalo, there's no getting out unless you retire. Yeah, you know, it just kind of seemed like you were trapped in that kind of that losing mindset, you know, once you enter Buffalo, at least, because they just didn't have that success. So I feel like they need to find something to turn it around.
And that's why I feel that the culture change is necessary, because to get out of that losing mentality, something has to change. And I think the culture is where you have to change that, because if you have a winning culture, if you have a winning mindset, then that's what's going to motivate your guys to keep on playing better. Now, acquisition-wise, they only lost Jason Pominville during the offseason, but then brought in a lot more other people. Jimmy Vesey, Colin Miller, Marcus Johansson. So they bring in a lot of depth guys as well. I just don't think it will help them out enough so that they can get into the playoffs. But again, it's really where the cards fall for the Buffalo Sabres. It depends. But again, here's the difficult part, is that Jack Eichel is now on his third different coach for the Buffalo Sabres. That has got to be really hard for the guy. He's the captain of this team, a very young captain, and he's had to switch out 3 different systems for this Buffalo Sabres team.
Yeah, because they just can't.
Yeah, they just can't
find what works.
Yeah, a stabilizing thing. And that's why I'm saying that culture needs to change to a winning culture, and Jack Eichel has to lead that charge.
You got to feel bad for Jack Eichel in a sense, too, because he was he's a very good player, you know, and he's just kind of, he's like everyone else in Buffalo, just kind of stuck in that Buffalo mindset, I guess you could call it, you know, where it's just, you know, it's getting hyped up before the season, thinking like, oh, we're going to be the team this year, you know. Everyone was saying, I think it was before 2 seasons ago, like, Buffalo is the team to beat, you know, they're going to make a playoff run, and they missed the playoffs again. You know, it's a story time and time again, and they desperately need something to change, you know, and maybe this coaching change will change that culture shift, just because sometimes it's not what you're doing on the ice, it's what you're doing off the ice that needs to change, and that could be the answer for them, or at least a step in the right direction.
Yeah, and hopefully Jack Eichel doesn't get written off because of this, because in previous season he just seems to be written off just because of the team he's been on. So it's unfortunate to see that, but hopefully this will be the year where the Sabres get more recognition for that.
That's true. All right. In 5th place in the Atlantic last season were the Florida Panthers with 36, 32, and 14 as their record. Total points of 86.
Now, this team is, I think, they took a whole 180-degree turn from last season to this season. And I think that all starts with getting Joel Quenneville as their head coach. That all starts with Joel Quenneville.
Yes.
Because he was, Chicago fans here will still tell you we have no idea why or how or why Stan Bowman would ever fire Joe Quenneville as their head coach, their Stanley Cup leading head coach for so many seasons. And now he goes to a team where they were on the outside looking in. They missed the playoffs again. But now they just needed that extra step to get to a competitive level.
I feel like
they're in great hands right now.
This past season, they've definitely made a step in the right direction. So I feel like with Quenneville coming and with the players they've picked up during the offseason.
Sergei Bobrovsky. There's already one.
Yeah, to bolster your goaltending after Luongo retired.
Yep.
And who was backing him
Anton
up?
Strawman, Brett
I can't remember
Connolly.
who's backing up Luongo now.
It was James Reimer.
That's right, yeah.
But he also left. So I think they're relying on one of their young guys from the AHL probably to plug in.
Having
but at the same
Bobrovsky
time, Bobrovsky is probably going to start 60-plus games anyway because of his starting caliber. So just having somebody else to plug in as a backup, it wouldn't be bad for the Florida Panthers if they have someone young right behind him. So that wouldn't be too bad. But other than that, they got Noel Acciari, Brett Connolly from the Washington Capitals. That gives them nice forward depth. Brett Connolly has been a very underrated guy. Anton Strawman, of course, very good blue line defenseman. He helps out a lot in special teams. He will be a great help in their power play, which also was not that great last season. So this is a whole different Florida team that really looks good.
Yes.
So
yeah.
And the only departures they had was those two goaltenders and their head coach. So they really didn't lose much, and they gained a lot.
Yep. And this is a team that has had some success in the past. A couple seasons back, they were on top of this division.
Right.
When Marchessault was with them, and he had his standout season before he went to Vegas in the expansion draft, and when they had Gerard Gallant as well, who also went to Vegas. Vegas just took a lot of people from Florida. Looking at it now, wow.
Then again, Florida also took Marchessault from Tampa. So
that's true.
Yes. I was really sad about that because I knew Marchessault was going to be like our next Kucherov almost, or Braden Point almost, And then all of a sudden, one off season, we're like, well, we need cap space and we have to trade into the Panthers.
But this is a team that has that kind of. At least some of those guys, like Aaron Ekblad, who's been there through it, they have that in the back of their mind. They're saying, okay, we were that team. How can we get back? Whereas I think that motivation for some other teams isn't there because of their past seasons. But I think for Florida, it's definitely there. Okay, we had a couple rough years, time to get back to that form that we were. A couple years back, regardless of the guys that are still on the team.
I have always felt that they've always had that talent too, but it's just they needed an extra step, and I feel like Joe Quenneville is that extra step that they needed. And knowing that, they got just an amazing group of talent. Their first line is Alexander Barkov, Jonathan Huberdeau, and Evgeny Dadonov, which is a very, very solid and dangerous first line. But then outside of that, you still got guys like Vinny Trocheck. Brett Connolly's on the third line now. Frank Vatrano. Noel Acciari fits into that fourth center spot. And Colton Sevier coming from Dallas as well. So they got depth for days on forward lines. So now it's a question of if they can score. One of the things that plagued them last season is that they just could not score enough. Jonathan Huberdeau had a down season a little bit. He needs to get a little bit better there. So it just depends on how their competitive level just needs to take that next step. That's pretty much it, and that's what I think that they will be able to do this season.
Yep, it's going to be like all these other teams we talked about. I feel the ones that missed the playoffs last year. It's all about executing. They have the pieces. Now they just need to make it work.
Now I do think the Florida Panthers will make this wild card spot too. I think they will make a wild card spot, but looking at the standings, they could definitely compete for a top three spot in the Atlantic, but it is going to be hard because they still have to face Toronto, Tampa, and Boston. So
yeah, it's going to
be competitive.
There are some big names in that division as well, which could make it tougher for them. But I think if they play all the pieces right, I think they'll be looking good for hopefully a wild card spot to get them back in the playoffs. Mm-hmm. So, all right, I think we're going to take a break here. We'll come back after it with the remaining four teams in the Atlantic Division. So we're going to take a short break here on 88.1 FM, WLRA, The Start from Lewis University in Romeoville, Illinois. This is the Dump and Chase Hockey Show on WLRA. You're listening to the Dump and Chase podcast on 88.1 FM, WLRA, The Start, Lewis University, Romeoville, Illinois. Reid Poland with Rebecca and Jake in the studio talking NHL hockey. Before the break, we covered the last four teams of the Atlantic Division last season, and we're going to be starting off with the top four. Going back with the fourth spot, Montreal Canadiens. They had a record of 84. Wow. Let me try that again. 44 wins, 30 losses, and 8 overtime losses. Total points of 96, just shy of a playoff spot.
And they were on the cusp of that playoff spot, and they were kind of fighting with Florida for that final spot, but it was dominated. That division was just dominated by the top three of Tampa Bay, Boston, and Toronto.
I would say
So
those
the only way that they would have gone through is going to the wild card and fighting for the teams in the Metropolitan Division to find that wild card spot. So, unfortunately, when they stood up to those other competitive teams in the Metropolitan, which was really deep last year, they didn't fare up well against them, and they missed that playoff spot. So, but this year, what needs to change is that special teams is a big issue for the Montreal Canadiens. That's definitely something that they need to do. Their power play was absolutely atrocious, 30th in the league.
Oh boy!
So that has got to get better, and they didn't really do much this offseason to change that. They only brought in Nick Cousins, Ben Sherratt, and Keith Kincaid as a backup goaltender. So, and then they lost Andrew Shaw, Anthony Niemi, Jordy Ben, and Nick Delorier. So with their special teams, they just needed better coaching, I think, and just work on that power play, practice in, practice out, every day of the week if they can.
Yep.
Improve on that special teams, because that special teams, I think, will get them to a competitive level. But the changes for the Canadiens isn't much of a change. So I'm not sure exactly how they're going to fare this season either.
Yeah, it's nothing huge, It's
nothing huge.
Yeah, unlike the other teams we kind of talked about that had some bigger moves, whereas Montreal, they really haven't done enough, or a lot, I should say. We'll see if it's enough or if it's not.
I mean, looking at their first line, it's Brendan Gallagher, Philip Deneau is their first line center, and Thomas Tatar. And Max Domi is surprisingly their second line center, and project the lineup anyway. Mm-hmm. So looking at it, it's different, but they're also flip-flopping. Like the projected lineups for the Canadiens is changing. Thomas Tatar right now, from what the projected line I'm looking at, is the first line left winger, and Jonathan Drouin is the left winger on the second line. And some projected lineups are switching them and putting Jonathan Drouin on the first line, putting Max Domi as the first line center. So it's very confusing on how the Canadiens are going to do it. Obviously, it's very early, sir, so things will definitely change, but it's still kind of confusing. Nothing's really set in stone for this Montreal Canadiens team right now.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I mean, like, unlike the four other teams we've talked about today, where it seems like they all kind of have their pieces together, Montreal just doesn't really seem to have what they need, Yeah. I feel like they really didn't hurt or help themselves in the offseason.
Yeah.
They've just kind of, stayed as Montreal.
Yeah.
They're very similar to the team they were last season, so it'll be interesting to see if that's enough.
Yeah, and then maybe Carey Price getting better this season. Obviously, Carey Price kind of had a down season last year, but at the same time, I can't really blame him because his team around him didn't really do much for him.
Yeah.
So it might be the same story this season as well if they didn't really make too many changes. Now, obviously, I think the biggest change will have to be their special teams. I think if they can just coach that well, I think they will still be a little bit better than they were last season. But other than that, I'm not really sure what can propel them to get into a playoff spot.
Special teams definitely need to improve, and I feel like people need to stop pretending that Carey Price is going to be like their like hard carry throughout the season. Yeah, because he's shown that he's a good goaltender, but he can only do so much.
Right,
and he just doesn't have the ability to carry a team. Like he's good, but not carry level good. You still need that offense and defense in front of you.
Right,
you just can't rely on a good goaltender to stop pucks out when you can't put them into. Then when you need to score yourself.
Yeah, if you can't score, you can have the greatest goaltending in the world, but if you can't score, you're not going to win games.
Exactly.
And you could say that the same thing to Henrik Lundqvist for the Rangers. It's carrying the whole team for a number of years.
Yep.
Still hasn't gotten a ring. So.
Yeah. That's the same situation in New York. Yeah, but it'll be interesting with Montreal. I feel like I just feel like nothing about their offseason impresses me.
Right. Nothing really impressive.
It's just
they kind of just
Montreal.
stay the same, yeah.
Yeah. They were very level,
Average.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like that's a good way to put it, average. Yeah. All right. Moving into the third place team. The first team in this division to make the playoffs, the Toronto Maple Leafs, with a record of 46, 28, and 8, finishing with an even 100 points.
Yep. And boy, did the Maple Leafs had a busy offseason. My goodness. They got rid of a lot more players than they got back, which I feel like it hurts them, but it doesn't hurt their playoff chances as much.
Yeah.
I don't think now losing Kadri is big. Losing Nikita Zaitsev and Ron Hainsey and Jake Gardiner, I think, are the biggest key ones.
Yeah.
But then they brought in Alex Kerfoot, which is not bad. I think the biggest one they got was Tyson Barrie from Colorado. He was first-line defenseman all the way for Colorado. He was Colorado's best defenseman. So that's a huge acquisition for them. But defensively, that's good. But I feel like Kerfoot is not at the same level at all from Kadri. So replacing Nazem Kadri is going to be, I think, the key component which they have to focus on this season, and how they're going to score moving on, because they also lost, Patrick Marleau. They lost Connor Brown, so they lost a lot of forward depth. So they need to replace that forward depth with either more scoring from Austin Matthews or John Tavares, or they just need to find some other players that they can spread the puck around to as well. So,
yep, I feel like Toronto is going to be, like we said, another team just about executing, which is I feel like that's the moral of the story of us going through these teams. It's just everyone's making these moves, but they don't mean a thing
if you don't
if you can't put the puck in the net.
Right. Exactly.
So,
but it looks good on paper, but it's just losing a lot of guys in the season, losing a lot of that forward depth, it makes me a little scared that their scoring isn't going to be as good as it last season, unless of course somebody steps up and gets more production out of them and whatnot. Austin Matthews can step up his production a little bit too. So it's but again, it's like you said, it's all about executing at that point. It's how they're going to fare at this at the end of the season.
I feel like they're still be
playoff bound though.
I would say they'll still be a competitor, but I feel like they'll have a harder time getting there.
They'll definitely have a harder time. I think because of Florida's rise, I think that third spot for that division is going to be really between Florida and Toronto this year.
Yep.
Because Toronto got a little bit, I wouldn't say considerably worse, but it's just a little bit under the level to which they were last season. And of course, we just talked about Florida. They just completely took a huge turn.
And what are they doing about the Marner situation? Have they gotten anywhere in signings?
Yeah, Mitch Marner,
I totally forgot about that.
Yeah, I totally forgot about that too. But the stories were coming out that he was going to get signed for a big deal or whatnot. And
that's what I heard.
Yeah,
but then they were saying cap space.
Yeah, I don't know. They're saying cap space, but right now he's still on their roster, but at the same time he's looking for a deal. But at the same time, I wouldn't be surprised if the Maple Leafs make a deal for him maybe at the trade deadline or something.
I mean, if he has 94 points, you would think you'd want to sign him.
Right, he's their first-line right winger. Yeah. And besides him, you only have William Nylander's their second-line right winger. I don't think he can transition to a first line. And then you got Kasperi Kapanen. Kasperi Kapanen is a very good young player. I do like him. But then, other than that, there really is no right wingers that can really replace Mitch Marner.
Yeah. I don't know.
And it would be a detriment to that because John Tavares has a really good chemistry with Mitch Marner on that first line.
Yep.
So I feel if you take away Mitch Marner too, that could also hurt John Tavares' production.
That's the main kind of gap to be filled in now.
Yeah.
With Toronto. So it'll be interesting to do. And, there's always, when they get to the playoffs, I feel like they always run into Boston, and they always get eliminated by Boston. They haven't been able to catch a break from that for what seems like forever.
I hate that suit too, though.
Yeah,
it's unfortunate.
They'll be a fun team to watch, I feel, as they were last season with that younger core, kind of led by John Tavares, and they had, with Matthews and, all those younger guys. I feel like they definitely have a bright future, even if they aren't able to kind of reach that peak now. I think they'll, in the next couple of years, we'll be seeing some good things from them. Yeah,
and now Tyson Barrie coming in, too, would really solidify their defensive roles, too, and their defensive depth there as well. So they should be, on paper, a better defensive team as well this season.
They should. Yep. All right. Moving on to the second place team in the Atlantic Division, the Boston Bruins, everyone's favorite, record 49, 24, and 9, 107 points. They advanced to the Stanley Cup Final.
I love them so much.
Which was their big thing this season.
Which was also their big loss.
It was also yes, it was also their big loss. That's true as well. Yep.
And they had a 2-for-2 deal in the offseason. Get Brett Ritchie, get Par Lindholm, and lose Marcus Johansson and Noel Acciari. Obviously, I think the departures outweigh the arrivals, but it doesn't hurt them to a point that they're not playoff bound still.
Yeah.
I mean, it's the Boston Bruins. Their roster's still filled with absolute playmakers. Patrice Bergeron first, David Pastrnak, Brad Marchand. As much as many people hate him, but he's still productive. So it's like as long as you're productive, that's the first line. David Pastrnak, Bergeron, and Marchand. That's just one of the best first lines in hockey. People have been talking about it for 2 seasons now.
Yeah.
So it's still dangerous. David Krejci's still there. Charlie Coyle now at the third line center spot. Other than that, that's where I think the issue would be for Boston is just their depth. Other than the guys I just listed, there really isn't big names out there. Brett Ritchie is their third liner guy. Danton Heinen is on their third line. Joakim Nordstrom on their fourth line. Chris Wagner. Some underrated up-and-coming guys that not a lot of people have heard of. So that can speak to their depth as well. Their depth is just not there as it was, I think, this season. So I think that, if anything, if a negative for this team this season, it's just their depth on forward lines, and see where that will go for them.
I think for as much crap people give Boston, you have to acknowledge that they've been a consistent team for the past many seasons. You know,
it's like the Detroit Red Wings of the 2000s.
Exactly.
Nobody liked them because they were always great, but they were also the hardest hitting team, and they would never take any
because they've held their main core of players, and it's been working, and they haven't really changed a ton. And I think that's,
as a franchise, that's successful.
Exactly.
That's called success.
Yep. So as much as we wanna knock them, you kind of have to give them a little bit of credit as well.
Yep.
So all right, moving up. The last team to talk about in the Atlantic Division, in first place, the President's Trophy winner, Tampa Bay Lightning, 62-16-4, 128 points, a stellar season, only to get swept in the first round of the playoffs. I had to bring it up, Jake.
Yeah. Well, it would also really be professional if we didn't bring it up anyway.
We can't talk about Tampa Bay without the sweep.
So yeah, nobody can talk about it without the sweep. That is going to be how this season is going to really play out for the Lightning. Are they going to have that series on their minds when they next go to the playoffs this season, which they should?
Yes.
So, at this point, it's like no one can deny that they're going to go to the playoffs. No matter what the regular season record is at this point, you can just throw away the regular season at this point because we know that they're going to make the playoffs.
Or will they?
It's the playoffs where the issue is. That's
yep.
And plus, you look at the division anyway. Boston, Toronto is slightly not as good, but then Florida's going to be better. But Tampa Bay, I think only Boston and Tampa are going to be the ones that are reaching for that number one spot.
Yeah.
But again, when you reach the playoffs, that's where the Lightning are going to be tested. Are they going to have that same mindset going into the first round? Now, the biggest problem I heard was that the first round is that they took their foot off the gas pedal. That's what
they forgot where the gas pedal was.
Yeah, exactly.
They got it confused with the brake.
That's what the players said. That's what John Cooper said, and that is where the issue is going to be. They know that they can't take the good foot off the gas pedal, and because they had a 3-0 lead, they took it off, and they went easy on the Blue Jackets. That's something you can never do in the playoffs, ever. That is, no team will ever tell you to ever do that. You outscore them 10-0 if you have to. You never take your foot off the gas pedal.
Yeah.
So you just got to keep doing that. But acquisition-wise, they brought in some depth because they needed to get some cheap players to get into cap space because they had to get rid of a lot of people to free up cap space. They lost JT Miller. They lost Adam Early. Ryan Callahan is gone. His injuries have also been an issue, so they didn't really want his contract. Dan Girardi is gone. Anton Strawman is gone. They're taking away a lot of old guys that had a good amount of contracts to get rid of cap space, and they bring in Kevin Shattenkirk, Curtis McElhaney to back up Andrei Vasilevsky, Patrick Maroon, Luke Shen, and Luke Witkowski is back also with the Lightning because he was with the Detroit Red Wings for a while. Comes back now with the Lightning. Patrick Maroon fits right into the fourth-line center spot for the Tampa Bay Lightning as well. Fourth-line right-wing spot, I should say. Mm-hmm. And that gives them already very good depth on there as well. And again, their roster looks great. As always, Braden Point's the first-line center. Stamkos in second. Kucherov's still there. He's going to have a great season. The roster already looks good. Everything is just on the playoffs. How are they going to respond to the playoffs?
Yep.
And it's sad because they know that you can't have the excuse that you don't know how to lose in the playoffs. They have lost tons of times.
They know how to lose.
They know how to lose in the playoffs.
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, losing in the Stanley Cup final, losing a bad Game 7 against the. What was it? Oh man, I can't even remember. Losing 4-0 against the Montreal Canadiens their first year.
Yep.
In 2015, 14 or something like that. 4-0 against the Canadiens. Next year they come back and they sweep the Canadiens. Game 5, the Canadiens, and then the next very season. So they know how to take those losses. Losing against the Pittsburgh Penguins in Game 7. So it's like, they definitely know how to lose. It's just this 4-0 sweep was a different story. This was not that they were the underdogs like it was with the Montreal Canadiens back in 2015. They were the underdogs.
They were the
time.
favorite. Everyone, I think, had them winning the cup, and then to get swept in the first round is like the biggest
And this was my biggest fear too going into playoffs is the President's Trophy. I get so scared whenever a team wins the President's Trophy because it's just a curse. No matter who wins the President's Trophy, it's like they're doomed to fail in the playoffs.
Is it the curse of the President's Trophy, or is it just the Tampa Bay curse?
No, it's really just the President's Trophy. When was the last time? I actually wanted to say. Actually, hold on. Let me look this up. I want to see when was the last time. I know the Canadiens were the last team to win a Stanley Cup when they won the President's Trophy.
Speaking of playoffs, can we talk about the Twitter apology the team put out? I feel like someone just had the Twitter phone that they tweet from and just gave it to an intern and being like, no one here feels like tweeting because we're all really sad. Can you do it? And that's what they came up with. And they're
I thought it was funny.
And they're like, we're sorry. And and it just turned into a meme.
Yeah, that is true. And but at the same time, that's like at that point, it's like if you lose that badly, you want to try to turn it into something
you can say
happy.
After that.
You really can't.
There's nothing.
Yeah, there's
nothing.
Really nothing.
That's
there
when
really
you just put
isn't.
out the thank you fans graphic and don't even acknowledge it. Being like, thanks for the great season. Don't even mention the playoffs.
Yeah.
Just post a picture of your President's Trophy and be proud with that.
Okay, so actually, I just looked this up. The last team that won the Cup with the President's Trophy was actually the Blackhawks in 2012 and 2013. So actually, that wasn't long ago.
So it's been somewhat recent.
It was somewhat recent, but yeah. But it still hasn't been as much. But actually, that was also their. I think that was their. Oh no, that was their second Stanley Cup out of their. What was it? 3? Yeah.
3. Yeah.
I can't even count at this point how many.
Yeah.
I want to say 5, but
I wish we had 5.
Yeah.
Doesn't everybody in this area know?
Oh, of course, yeah. All right, well, we've gone through the standings. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We'll give you our rankings and predictions for the next season for the Atlantic Division. You are listening to the Dump and Chase podcast on 88.1 FM, WLRA The Start in Lewis University in Romeoville, Illinois. You are listening to the Dump and Chase podcast on 88.1 FM, WLRA, The Start, Lewis University, Romeoville, Illinois. Reid, Rebecca, and Jake with you in the studio. Today, we just wrapped up going over all 8 teams in the Atlantic Division and our kind of a season in review, so to speak. And today, or not today, but now, we are going to go over our predictions for the division for the next season. So we're going to tell you who we think is going to win the division, who is going to be climbing in the standings, and who is going to be going down in the standings. So, shall I start?
Yes.
Sure, why
All right,
not?
cool. I'm going to say that Boston wins the division because I think they're looking solid.
Blasphemy.
Well, it's not going to be Tampa Bay, that's for sure.
Blasphemy.
Boston.
You're also biased.
Okay.
Jake is very biased.
No, that's not really biased because what changed? What changed with the Boston Bruins?
I think Tampa Bay is just going to be – I don't think it's a change in Boston. It's change in Tampa Bay. And Tampa Bay is not going to be the same team because they're going to be playing with the weight of that first-round sweep on their shoulders. And they won't be able to shake it. That's my thought. All right. That's who's going to win it. Boston. Boston is winning it. As for who's rising, Florida. I feel like that one's pretty obvious.
Yep.
They picked up a lot of good players, and I think they're going to be a much better team than last season. And who's falling? I'm going to say the Canadians. Because they're postseason, or excuse me, they're postseason / preseason. This in between season, whatever it's called, just
off season.
Off. That's the word I'm looking for. Yeah, couldn't find it.
Words are hard, Reid.
Words are hard. Yeah. It just seemed very mediocre, I guess.
I mean, they were like the quietest of.
They were so
all
quiet.
Teams.
So I don't know. I feel like they're gonna fall. Maybe they'll be a dark horse and just come out of nowhere and just destroy everyone. Yeah. But I see them going down in the standings. Personally,
I think,
Jake, what do you got?
I think I'm lining a little bit with you on that one. Obviously, Florida's the big riser. Biggest difference is I have Lightning winning the division.
Oh boy.
Boston being in second, but I think the Toronto will fall, but not too much. I think they'll fall a bit, where the Florida Panthers will be third in the division. And Toronto will be the one that's fighting for that wild card spot.
I could see that.
So I think they will do that, and then Montreal will be out of the playoffs. But I think Toronto will fall just a bit, and then be in the wild card spot. To probably solidify a wild card spot at least.
So
I want to say Buffalo rises, but I can't. Like in my heart.
Within the next couple years, I think they're gonna rise.
The next couple years, but not this next season.
Right.
I agree with that. So Jake, you have Tampa Bay winning. Toronto falling, Florida rising.
Yeah.
Got it. All right.
And I feel Ottawa's not going to move from 8th. Detroit
I
and
feel
Buffalo
like the bottom
are going to
three
flip-flop.
will be kind of locked where they are.
Yeah, Ottawa's going to be locked.
Yeah.
They may shift around a little bit, but I think those three teams will still be bottom three.
I think Buffalo will at least be better than Montreal. Buffalo and Detroit will actually be better than Montreal.
So you're putting Montreal way at the bottom.
Yeah, I think they're going to be second to last. Right above Ottawa.
Interesting.
I think Detroit getting Yzerman and getting some good development teams, getting Valtteri Filppula, will help them reach another level of competitiveness, so that they won't obviously make the playoffs, but they will still be there at a pretty high place in the division. So I think that they can overtake the Montreal Canadiens there. Buffalo with Montreal is hard to take, but I want to say Buffalo rises just because they just have to get out of this losing culture. They just have to, and at some point it has to happen at some season, and maybe it's not this season, but I hope it's this season.
Yeah,
they can get.
You talk about you still say Tampa Bay winning the division again.
Yes.
What if hot take here?
Oh man,
Tampa Bay doesn't make the playoffs next season.
Guess who's rubbing it in your face?
You heard it here. Tampa Bay is not going to make the playoffs next season.
There's no way.
Oh, there's definitely a way.
There's no way.
I think they go into the season.
There is no possible way.
They are just so weighed down because they know that they got swept when they won the President's Trophy. Every little record from last season.
You know how many ifs you have to fill in?
Oh, there's a lot of ifs, but I feel like it'll happen because every record from last season, every trophy that was won by guys has a little asterisk next to it. And the asterisk says, swept in the first round after winning the President's Trophy, okay? Because there's just a huge butt about their season, and it's that they were swept, you know?
Okay, but this is the first team that's won the President's Trophy and it's gotten knocked out.
I know, but this
round.
is Tampa Bay, though, who has had
so close to having
they have had so many problems.
Season get swept.
I mean, look at this. The Washington Capitals were the same team, throughout the 2000s, and all the way up until now, for almost 20 years, playoffs. Knocked out. Playoffs, knocked out. They didn't even reach the Stanley Cup final until
Tampa Bay has
2
just
years
had
ago.
The past long time of them being like they are the team in the playoffs and then seemingly falling apart. So maybe this is the big decline.
But again, that was Washington for the past 20 years.
Yeah, the thing with Washington is that they actually finally won a cup, which I don't see Tampa Bay doing.
But that's exactly what I'm saying. I think Tampa Bay could do that. Tampa Bay started only making the playoffs in 2015. That's only 4 years. 4 years in a row.
But it's been 4 very average years.
5 years, actually, I should say. 5 years
very average years in the playoffs.
But how many times have the Washington Capitals gone? How many times have the Pittsburgh Penguins gone to the playoffs? And they didn't win until from 1992 to 2009. You know, Detroit Red Wings go to the playoffs every year, but they don't win it every year either.
But at least they're consistently, doing decent in the playoffs.
That is true.
Where Tampa Bay has just kind of like blown a tire every time they get to the postseason.
Even if the Lightning, you know what? I think the Lightning will win a Stanley Cup when they get in on a wild card spot. Because that's how the Kings did it. That's how they did it when they've won their first one.
It's going to be the wild card teams.
Yeah, it's going to be a wild card team. When they are going to be a wild card team.
I don't know.
I feel that when they're at a high level, when they play at a high level, they are ultra competitive and they stay at that top spot and they don't want to. They have the mentality of keeping that top spot, but then because of mishappenings like the Columbus Blue Jackets, they'll take their foot off the gas pedal when they are think that they're already the king and they don't need to keep pushing it anymore.
I think they've gotten too used.
I think the mentality is just too used to winning, too used to being at the top.
To winning.
Yeah. I feel like I think that is the biggest thing.
I think they need a
But
season.
I still think that this season won't be that season. I still think that they're going to be top 3 in the division. I don't think they're going to go all the way down to a wild card spot. That's highly improbable.
I think they need a season that kind of wakes them up, I guess, to like, hey, you guys are on top, but it like a little bit of a wake up call for them.
I feel there was one season actually we didn't make the playoffs, and I believe that was 2016 actually. So 2015 when they went to the Stanley Cup final against the Blackhawks, losing that, and then the next year they missed the playoffs by a slight margin, but everyone was favoring them to be in the top of the division. They disappointed. They didn't make the playoffs, and then next year they went all the way to the Eastern Conference final. And they actually went to the Eastern Conference final 2 years in a row after that. So I think that that's something they could use. It's something that they just go down the ladder, maybe miss the playoffs by like this much, but this season's not that season. I don't think it is going to be.
I think I'm still going to stand by my hot take.
I still think Boston's going to come in
maybe
first.
Rebecca, for your prediction, I think that could actually be a good thing. But I also don't want it to happen. At the same time.
Let's get to Rebecca's prediction.
It pains me to say it, but I think Boston's going to come out on top because I think that 4-0 sweep is still fresh in their heads.
Oh, it must be. I hope it is.
But they're also the team that's not going to take that. John Cooper's not going to allow the team to take that mentally. I know for a fact that he's not going to allow them like that. So I feel like that entire thing is just going to be way off their mind. So
I feel like
it'll be
off their mind until they lose the first game of the season.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh man, we're back to right where we were, guys. This isn't good.
Maybe actually that might happen, but at the same time they'll realize right away that they can't be at that mentality. But again, what do I know? I'm the Lightning fan here, I guess. So
Rebecca, let's see your predictions for who's rising and who's falling.
I definitely think Toronto's gonna fall because I think Toronto's going to fall, and then Florida's going to take their place. I don't think Toronto's going to be in the bottom. I think they're going to go to the wild card spot. And then I can kind of see the Lightning going down to, like, third.
Jake's just sitting over there.
Wait, so you're putting Florida over Tampa?
Yeah.
That's even more blasphemous than Reid saying Boston's going to win that. Because now you're talking about the other Florida State team being better than us?
Yeah, it's going to be a Florida rivalry, and Florida is going to win.
Oh, Lordy.
Yep. Florida
is against one, Jake. Sorry.
Okay, so with that...
Florida will be in, and Tampa will be out.
Okay.
I think they're still going to be a playoff team, just not as good as this year.
Okay. I don't know. They're still a playoff team. I just don't... There's no way they're not going to make the playoffs. There's no way this roster is not going to make the playoffs. There would have to be... Like, Kucherov would have to have like a 20-goal season in order for that to happen.
But everyone
Braden
said
Point would have to have like another 20-goal season.
last season, though, everyone said there's no way this team doesn't win the Stanley Cup.
And look what happened.
Actually, I didn't say that.
Oh,
I didn't
you
say
didn't,
that,
but a lot of other people
especially
did.
because they won the President's Trophy.
And
I was
the handwriting
like,
was on the wall that they should be the one to win the cup. Because there have been President's team winning trophies that aren't always the favorite for the cup because of just other teams, getting hot at the end of the year,
But at the same time, I still think the trophy is just a big curse nowadays because it seems like the best team just gets off their high horse early in the playoffs.
We talk about the curses, but then there's the whole thing about touching the conference trophy curses and.
See, I'm not superstitious, so I don't.
I think it's a curse.
I'm not
really
superstitious because I believe in my teams and their success in the playoffs.
Me too, even though they've let me down.
I think
a
Lightning
bit,
fans are just unsure of their team, so they blame the superstition of the President's Trophy.
Actually, no, because that's what happened to the Capitals 2 years ago too. Like that's what I'm saying. It's just
But didn't the Capitals win the Stanley Cup 2 years ago?
No, I mean that was a whole 3 seasons ago. 3 seasons ago, they won the President's Trophy. They lost in the second round. This has still been ongoing.
Did they get swept in the second round, though?
Well, they lost against Pittsburgh. I know that, I think. I would have to double-check. Anyway, but this thing has already been going for 6 years now, this President's Trophy curse, and I'm starting to honestly believe in it. So until the next President's Trophy winner comes in and wins the Stanley Cup, then probably I'll get rid of the superstition.
Maybe it'll happen this season.
Maybe.
Watch. Jake's superstition is going to be broke this season. Just how the Tampa Bay Lightning are not going to.
It's going to be the Lightning again, and they can actually win the Cup.
Look at this. Just 2 hot takes. Tampa Bay's not making the playoffs, and the winner of the President's Trophy wins the Stanley Cup. Boom. Mark my words. We're recording this, so we can come back to it when we're in the postseason next spring.
Oh, man.
And we'll see how right I am.
Anyway, so with that standing out of the way, now I actually want to see who is going to the playoffs for the entire Eastern Conference for you guys.
Oh, boy.
Okay, so first, my take.
How do they do the playoff qualification, by the way? Because the whole wild card situation.
So wild card is obviously based on points, but then I think for.
So it's top 3 in the division, and then the next 2 best teams in the conference.
Yes.
Okay.
That's how it is.
Got it.
So the top 3 division. For the top 3 or top 6 teams for me would be Tampa, Boston, and Florida. And then Washington, Carolina. Washington, Pittsburgh, Carolina.
Okay.
Those are the top 3.
I'm saying from the Atlantic. Oh, wait. You have to do your wild card ones, right?
And the wild card's going to be Toronto and the Atlantic. And
well, you can have 2 wild cards from the same division, though.
Yeah, you can,
yeah.
but I just don't see anybody else besides those 4 in the Atlantic making it.
Uh-huh.
So Metropolitan would be Washington, Pittsburgh, Carolina, and that last wild card spot. It's between. I don't think Columbus will make it. I think it will be the fight between the Devil. Actually, I think the Devils can make that.
Ooh.
The Devils can make that final wild card spot. I just don't think the Islanders have the same roster anymore. I feel like they're going to take a step back. They didn't score enough goals last season, and I just am not a big fan of when teams don't score enough in one season. They usually don't rebound as fast the next season.
Yeah.
So I think New Jersey really has a good chance to make that spot because there really is no other team that can.
All right.
Maybe Columbus will compete for that spot, I think. But I think Columbus definitely took a step back because they don't really have any goaltending. So
here's what I'm saying for the playoffs for the Eastern Conference. In the Atlantic Division, Boston, Toronto, and Florida make it. Metropolitan, Washington, Pittsburgh, and Carolina. Wild card teams, the Islanders, and who?
Man, that last one is so hard.
I'm going to say the Islanders and the Devils.
Wait, did you say Florida?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
The Devils.
I say Islanders and Devils as the wild card.
Yeah, it's just I feel like
and Tampa Bay doesn't make it.
Sliding that in there.
I don't know how the Islanders will ever be. I don't know. Though I will say Barry Trotz being with the Islanders definitely makes them a competitor.
Barry Trotz really helped that team. Yeah.
They really do.
Yep.
Then again, they did get second in the Metropolitan, so.
They They did.
So that's
they're
a
still
big one.
they're still solid. Rebecca,
Do you have a prediction on
who are your
this?
teams?
For Atlantic, Boston, Florida, and
Tampa.
I might have to give it to him, yeah,
No.
just to get you off my back. Metropolitan, I'm going Carolina, Devils, and Washington.
That's your top 3?
That's a hot take.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Wow.
I like it. Pittsburgh not even in the top 3. Ooh.
I'm thinking they go wild card.
Okay, actually, I could see that. Because Pittsburgh did get 3rd in Metropolitan, and they were only 1 point away from being a wild card team. So that's actually
true.
possible. Carolina
true.
was literally 1 point away. So that's really, really possible. So, yeah, that's our playoff predictions for
Those
the
are the
Eastern
playoff
Conference.
predictions. Yep.
We're going to be doing the same thing for the Western Conference next week.
Next
as well.
week will be the Central Division.
My
So
boys.
we'll be going over Central, and then the week after that, we'll be doing the Pacific Division and wrapping up the Western Conference. And probably that week we'll have a full playoff prediction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we can actually get into the nitty-gritty of the playoffs.
Yeah. And then by then it'll almost be time for hockey to start.
Oh, yeah.
Which will be exciting. Regular season is getting closer and closer. We're less than a month out, right?
Isn't it like
Training
for
camp
some
is
teams
going
like
on now,
23
too.
days?
20-some days now for teams before they start playing, which is
And
which is
training
great.
camp's going
I'm
on
going
now,
through
so-
withdrawals.
It's been a long time since hockey has been on,
there's-
and I don't like it.
I've been
Right.
watching reruns.
Oh my
Oh,
god!
I would too, honestly. But there's the training camp stuff is also going on, so I
I would
would
say because they've had the rookie,
right the rookie
the rookie
mini camps.
tournament.
Yeah,
Yep.
the rookie tournaments and stuff like
and
that.
then
So
we'll get into preseason.
preseason's
and then,
gonna come in,
and
so
then boom, season starts.
that
Thank
will
God.
also
Exciting.
generate some of the headlines because injuries will definitely be coming. So
Yep.
we'll have to be looking
Stamkos will
forward
probably
to
get
that.
injured again.
And we
Yeah.
also have to look forward to that as a fantasy aspect as well. So
That's true. Yes, we
Oh,
will be
we've
covering.
heard
lots of
fantasy
stuff.
Yeah, we'll be
Lots
covering a
of
little bit of
stuff.
fantasy
Oh
on
yeah,
the show eventually as well. Yeah, that'll be more once the season gets started,
yeah.
though, as expected. All
And
right.
It'll be
after
some
we
fun
get our
stuff.
teams.
After we get our teams, yes, we,
Oh,
we
boy,
still need
that's
to
gonna
have our
be fun.
draft. Yeah, that should be fun though. All right. Well, this has been episode 2 of the Double Chase podcast on 88.1 FM, WLRA The Start, Lewis University, Romeoville, Illinois. I'm Reid with Rebecca and Jake, and we will see you all next week.